Hello, everyone. So, today we continue reading the book by Nassim Taleb, The Black Swan, and I'm really excited about the contents of the book because I think this is something what I've been looking for. Uh, so, some theory that explains how some events affect our life and this is about how fragile our life is and how fragile everything we build around us is. And I hope the author will also give us some insights into how to deal with with the problem of the black swan. Yeah, so I really like it, and I hope you like it too. So let's start. Let's read our next piece, our next extract. This is still chapter 4. And naturally, I invite you to discuss it with me. If you have such a wish, join my server and we will discuss some of the ideas and talk about it. Yeah, so I hope you would like to join me on my server. The link is in the description of the video. Yeah. So, okay. So I'm starting reading. Yeah, here's my book. A Brief History of the Black Swan Problem. This turkey problem, also known as the problem of induction, is a very old one, but for some reason it is likely to be called Hume's problem by a local philosophy professor. People imagine us skeptics and empiricists to be morose, paranoid, and tortured in our private lives, which may be the exact opposite of what history and my private experience reports. Like many of the skeptics I hang around with, Hume was jovial and a bon vivant, eager for literary fame, silent company, and pleasant conversation. His life was not devoid of anecdotes. He once fell into a swamp near the house he was building in Edinburgh. Owing to his reputation among locals as an atheist, a woman refused to pull him out of it until he recited the Lord's Prayer and the Belief, which, being practical minded, he did. But not before he argued with her about whether Christians were obligated to help their enemies. Hume looked unprepossessing. He exhibited that preoccupied state of the thoughtful scholar that so commonly impresses the undiscerning, the imbecile, writes a biographer. Strangely, Hume during his day was not mainly known for the works that generated his current reputation. He became rich and famous through writing a best-selling history of England. Ironically, when Hume was alive, his philosophical works, to which we now attach his fame, fell dead born off the press, while the works for which he was famous at the time are now hard to find. Hume wrote with such clarity that he puts to shame almost all current thinkers, and certainly the entire German graduate curriculum. Unlike Kant, Fichte, Schopenhauer, and Hegel, Hume is the kind of thinker who is sometimes read by the person mentioning his work. I often hear Hume's problem mentioned in connection with the problem of induction, but the problem is old, older than the interesting Scotsman, perhaps as old as philosophy itself, maybe as old as olive grove conversations. Let us go back into the past, as it was formulated with no less precision by the ancients. Sextus de Elas Empirical. The violently anti-academic writer, the anti-dogma activist Sextus Empiricus, operated close to a millennium and a half before Hume, and formulated the Torquay problem with great precision. We know very little about him. We do not know whether he was a philosopher or more of a copyist of philosophical texts by authors obscure to us today. We surmise that he lived in Alexandria in the second century of our era. He belonged to a school of medicine called empirical, since its practitioners doubted theories and causality and relied on past experience as guidance in their treatment, though not putting much trust in it. Furthermore, they did not trust that anatomy revealed function too obviously. The most famous proponent of the empirical school, Menodotus of Nicomedia, who merged empiricism and philosophical skepticism, was said to keep medicine an art, not a science, and insulate its practice from the problems of dogmatic science. The practice of medicine explains the addition of empiricus, the empirical, to Sextus's name. Sextus represented and jotted down the ideas of the school of the Pyrrhonian skeptics, who were after some form of intellectual therapy resulting from the suspension of belief. Do you face the possibility of an adverse event? Don't worry. Who knows, it may turn out to be good for you. Doubting the consequences of an outcome will allow you to remain imperturbable. The Pyrrhonian skeptics were docile citizens who followed customs and traditions whenever possible, but taught themselves to systematically doubt everything, and thus attain a level of serenity. But while conservative in their habits, they were rabid in their fight against dogma. Among the surviving works of Sextus is a diatribe with the beautiful title Adversus Mathematicus, sometimes translated as Against the Professors. Much of it could have been written last Wednesday night. Where Sextus is mostly interesting for my ideas in his rare mixing of philosophy and decision making in his practice. He was a doer, hence classical scholars don't say nice things about him. The methods of empirical medicine, relying on seemingly purposeless trial and error, will be central to my ideas on planning and prediction, on how to benefit from the black swan. In 1998, when I went out on my own, I called my research laboratory and trading firm Empirica, not for the same anti-dogmatist reasons, but on account of the far more depressing reminder that it took at least another 14 centuries after the works of the School of Empirical Medicine before medicine changed and finally became enigmatic, suspicious of theorizing, profoundly skeptical, and evidence-based. Lesson? That awareness of a problem does not mean much, particularly when you have special interests and self-serving institutions at play. Algazel. The third major thinker who dealt with the problem was the 11th century Arabic language skeptic Al-Ghazali, known in Latin as Al-Ghazali. His name for a class of dogmatic scholars was Gabi, literally the imbeciles, an Arabic form that is funnier than moral and more expressive than obscurantist. Althusser wrote his own against the professors, a diatribe called Terhavud al-Falasifa, which I translate as the incompetence of philosophy. It was directed at the school called Falasifa. The Arabic intellectual establishment was the direct heir of the classical philosophy of the academy, and they managed to reconcile it with Islam through traditional arguments. Alex's attack on scientific knowledge started a debate uh, with Averroes, the medieval philosopher who ended up having the most profound influence on any medieval thinker, on Jews and Christians, though not on Muslims. The debate between Alcazar and Averroes was finally but sadly won by both. In its aftermath, many Arab religious thinkers integrated and exaggerated Alcazar's skepticism of the scientific method, preferring to leave casual considerations to God. In fact, it was a stretch of his idea. The West embraced Averroes' rationalism built upon Aristotle's, which survived through Aquinas and the Jewish philosophers who called themselves Averroan for a long time. Many thinkers blame the Arabs' later abandonment of scientific method on Al-Ghazal's huge influence. He ended up fueling Sufi mysticism, in which the worshipper attempts to enter into communion with God, severing all connections with earthly matters. All of this came from the black swan problem. The skeptic, friend of the religion. While the ancient skeptics advocated learned ignorance as the first step in honest inquiries toward truth, later medieval skeptics, both Muslims and Christians, used skepticism as a tool to avoid accepting what today we call science. Belief in the importance of the black swan problem, worries about induction, and skepticism can make some religious argument more appealing, though in stripped down anti-clerical theistic form. This idea of relying on faith, not reason, was known as fideism. So, there is a tradition of black swan skeptics who found solace in religion, best represented by Pierre Bayle, a French speaking Protestant erudite, philosopher, and theologian who, exiled in Holland, built an extensive philosophical architecture related to the Pyrrhonian skeptics. Bayle's writings exerted some considerable influence on Hume, introducing him to ancient skepticism, to the point where Hume took ideas wholesale from Bayle. Bayle's Dictionnaire historique et critique was the most read piece of scholarship of the 18th century, but like many of my French heroes, such as Frédéric Bastiat, Bayle does not seem to be part of the French curriculum and is nearly impossible to find in the original French language. Nor is the 14th century Algazalist Nicolas of Hautrecourt. Indeed, it is not a well-known fact that the most complete exposition of the ideas of skepticism until recently remains the work of a powerful Catholic bishop who was an august member of the French Academy. Pierre-Daniel Huet wrote his philosophical treatise on the weaknesses of the human mind in 1690, a remarkable book that tears through dogmas and questions human perception. Huet presents arguments against causality that are quite potent. He states, for instance, that any event can have an infinity of possible causes. Both Huet and Bayle were erudites and spent their lives reading. Huet, who lived into his 90s, had a servant follow him with a book to read aloud to him during meals and breaks, and thus avoid lost time. He was deemed the most read person in his day. Let me insist that erudition is important to me. It signals genuine intellectual curiosity. It accompanies an open mind and the desire to probe the ideas of others. Above all, an erudite can be satisfied with his own knowledge, and such satisfaction is a wonderful shield against platonicity, the simplifications of the 5 minute manager, or the philistinicism of the over specialized scholar. Indeed, scholarship without erudition can lead to disasters. I don't want to be a turkey. But promoting philosophical skepticism is not quite the mission of this book. If awareness of the black swan problem can lead us into withdrawal and extreme skepticism, I take here the exact opposite direction. I am interested in deeds and true empiricism. So, this book was not written by a Sufi mystic or even by a skeptic in the ancient or medieval sense, or even, we will see, in a philosophical sense, but by a practitioner whose principal aim is not to be a sucker in things that matter. Period. Hume was radically skeptical in the philosophical cabinet, but abandoned such ideas when it came to daily life, since he could not handle them. I am doing here the exact opposite. I am skeptical in matters that have implications for daily life. In a way, all I care about is making a decision without being the turkey. Many middlebrows have asked me over the past 20 years, how do you, Talib, cross the street given your extreme risk consciousness? Or have stated the more foolish, you are asking us to take no risks. Of course, I am not advocating total risk phobia, but we see that I favor an aggressive type of risk taking. All I will be showing you in this book is how to avoid crossing the street blindfolded. They want to live in mediocrity. I have just presented the black stone problem in its historical form, the central difficulty of generalizing from available information or of learning from the past, the known and the seen. I have also presented the list of those who, I believe, are the most relevant historical figures. You can see that it is extremely convenient for us to assume that we live in a mediocrity. Why? Because it allows you to rule out these black swan surprises. The black swan problem either does not exist or is of small consequence if you live in mediocrity. Such an assumption magically drives away the problem of induction, which since Sextus Empiricus has been plaguing the history of thinking. The statistician can do away with epistemology. Wishful thinking. We do not live in mediocrity, so the black swan needs a different mentality. As we cannot push the problem under the rug, we will have to dig deeper into it. This is not a terminal difficulty, and we can even benefit from it. Now, there are other themes arising from our blindness to the black swan. A. We focus on pre-selected segments of the scene and generalize from it to the unseen, the error of confirmation. B. We fool ourselves with stories that cater to our platonic thirst for distinct patterns, the narrative fallacy. C. We behave as if the black swan does not exist. Human nature is not programmed for black swans. D. What we see is not necessarily all that is there. History hides black swans from us and gives us a mistaken idea about the odds of these events. This is the distortion of silent evidence. E. We tunnel, that is, we focus on a few well-defined sources of uncertainty, on too specific a list of black swans, at the expense of the others that do not easily come to mind. I will discuss each of the points in the next 5 chapters. Then, in the conclusion of part 1, I will show how, in effect, they are the same topic. Okay, this has been the second part of the 4th chapter, yeah, and I invite you to join my Discord server. The link is in the description of the video below. So please come and we will discuss something and we will have a wonderful time together, yeah, talking about the black swan problem. Yeah, so if you like theorizing and discussing some philosophical matter, you're absolutely welcome here. Yeah, so and now I stop my video. Till the next time then. I guess that next Sunday again I will be here reading the successive chapter.